So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Pokemon? So let's start the series. A sun-kissed blonde boy was sleeping in a bed in the far-off region of Unova. It was a calm night, and the only thing that could wake him up was the roar of thunder. He jumped and snapped his sapphire blue eyes open, looking around his room for anything that might hurt him. He quickly calmed down and realized that it was simply the sound of thunder on a stormy night. You might be wondering why a 7-year-old boy would wake up in such a manner. And the story is quite tragic. You see, Naruto here is the oldest son of the famous contester Kushina Uzumaki, who specialized in both fire and water types, while his father is Minato Namikaze, the Unova champion, and nicknamed the Yellow Flash for his mastery over electric-type Pokemon I mentioned. Before that, Naruto was the oldest child, meaning he had siblings. Two redheads, Mito and Menma Namikaze. To people who see the family, they would seem like the perfect family, which is only true when it's only the four of them, because when Naruto is there, he only gets looked at with annoyance and hate. From hate, he could understand why his siblings hated him. Any child would do the same as their parents and not questions. They weren't the problem. Naruto's problem were his parents. He didn't understand what he did to receive such hate. He, of course, did ask his father, only to be met with a look of hatred and some of the harshest words he had ever heard. It had broken him, and only later did he realize that his father didn't answer his question. After that, he thought about his family with contempt and hatred as he got up and walked shakily towards the door. He heard his floorboards creak horribly, and when he opened it, he saw a warm-looking hallway that was completely different from his room. He glanced at the clock at the end of the hallway and realized he had about 2 hours before his parents woke up, so he hurried to the bathroom to get ready for the day, and 20 minutes later, he emerged looking refreshed and blank-faced. He was wearing a black shirt with a black jumper over it and black baggy trousers. He went to get some food because he knew he still had plenty of time and that if he didn't eat now, he wouldn't get anything else for the rest of the day. As he was going down the stairs, he noticed without realizing that these floorboards didn't creak or make any noises. But he quickly lost interest because he had already decided that months earlier. He thought it was pathetic when he heard another thunderclap that made him jump while he was eating cereal because he didn't like to appear weak, and he felt that being afraid of thunder made him look weak. He was annoyed when he heard another thunderclap that made him flinch while he was eating milk. After that, there was silence, which made him thankful until he heard a Pokemon screech. He thought it was his imagination, but then he heard it again, this time accompanied by the sound of thunder, which caused him to jump and let him out of his frozen state. He began to worry about what he should do in this situation. He was unable to inform his parents that they would not accept that he and his siblings were as worthless as he was. When he heard the screech again, he ran into the storm without thinking twice. He ran for what seemed like hours, but was really only a few minutes. He would have said that he ran because it was the right thing to do, but now he ran because his instincts told him to. When he finally reached the location where the cries for help were coming from, he saw a fallen tree that was on fire, but there was no sign of the Pokemon. He stood there looking around, hearing nothing, and hoping that whatever Pokemon was calling for help was still alive and could make any noise, but he heard nothing. He sat beneath a nearby tree and started crying as he stared blankly at the fire in front of him. A million thoughts racing through his mind. He felt like a failure, disgusted with himself for not being able to help someone, and hated himself. It now made sense why his parents detested him. He was a failure because he was powerless to help anyone. He heard a whimper as he stood up, tears still streaming down his face, and froze, waiting to see if he was dreaming. He was rewarded with another whimper from the other side of the broken tree. And in a matter of seconds, he was on the other side of the tree, and what he saw made his already broken heart break into a million pieces. A brown fox was lying with half of its body beneath the tree, but that wasn't what shocked him so much. What shocked him was seeing it weeping and giving up hope, just as he had just moments before. He said, "Hey," not knowing how to get its attention, but was pleased to see it snap its head up and stare at him with both fear and rage, fear of death and rage to show that it could still hurt him if it wanted to. He showed it both of its hands, which was a clear sign that he was unarmed and that he meant no harm. He took that as a sign to continue, saying, "I heard your calls for help and came as quickly as I could. I'm going to try and help, okay?" He received only a nod in return, and as he approached the tree, he felt a sharp pain come from his right hand. He grunt and grit his teeth to avoid screaming in agony. As soon as he noticed that the fox had bitten him, he realized that it didn't trust him as much as he had assumed. Ignoring the warning growl, he moved his arm as delicately as he could towards the light blue tuft of hair on its head. As he touched the fox, he felt it bite down harder, making him grit his teeth, but that didn't stop him from scratching its head to demonstrate that he truly meant no harm to it. After a few tense seconds, he was relieved to see it take its mouth off his hand so he could resume his planned activities. He had lived with fear for years, but this was a new kind of fear for him. He was frozen in shock once more, trying to make plans in his head, but all he got were blanks. He was confronted by a tremendous amount of fire and an insane sense of heat as he turned back to the tree. With reflexes he didn't know he had, he leaped away from the tree, landing on his backside and staring at the tree in fear. He looked back at the fox as he stared at the fire and saw that it was staring back at him. He looked into its eyes and saw a range of emotions, including fear, pain, and despair, but also trust. He believed that the eyes are the doors to the soul, and he made a promise to himself that he would keep the fox's trust and save it. So, with new vigor, he ran at the tree. He felt the adrenaline pumping through his veins instead of anger as he tried to pick up the tree. He felt it move up and heard a whimper come from his right. "Sorry," he said through gritted teeth and shaking arms and legs. He felt the heat get closer to him and opened his eyes. Not realizing that they had been closed out of concentration, he was greeted with the sight of the fire dancing dangerously close to his throat. He yelped as he felt the fire start burning his left hand, shoulder, and chest. He ended up pushing the tree up higher than before, feeling the fire burn him more but still not letting go. He wasn't going to waste the trust that the fox gave him. He prayed to Arceus that the Pokemon had already moved because he didn't know how long he could keep holding the tree, and as if answering his prayer, he heard a bark letting him know that Fox was safe and behind him. So with as much energy as he could, he pushed the tree away from him and fell on his back. He lay on the ground and watched the rain fall. After a few minutes, the adrenaline left his body, and he began to hiss in agony as the burns he had sustained began to cause him pain. He tried to stand up after feeling some energy return to his body, but he ended up falling back on all fours right away. He looked to his right and left, but saw nothing, so he sighed and let his head fall, not knowing where to look for the brown fox. As he sat there, he felt a lick on his chin, which caused him to snap his head up and grit his teeth from the pain of the sudden movement. But he didn't care. The fox that was examining him smiled at him as he looked up, realizing he hadn't done that himself yet. He quickly realized that he didn't know what Pokemon it was, but he didn't care. After they had finished examining each other, they just stared at each other, noting that it was lighter now than before, indicating that it was morning and that the rain had stopped. It had a brown body with a black mane, a brown tuft of hair on its head with the top being light blue, and legs and eyebrows that were also light blue. When Naruto finished examining the sky, he looked down at the fox and saw it close its eyes and push his forehead in his direction. Unsure of what to do, he copied it, and what he saw astounded him. He experienced a range of emotions, including gratitude, trust, joy, protectiveness, and love. He realized that the love she was sending him wasn't romantic, rather, it was a sibling kind of love. He realized that the fox was a she. He wasn't sure how he knew, but he did, and he believed it. The next thing he experienced was witnessing her memories, seeing her emerge from an egg, seeing her be rejected and despised by her pack and family due to her different color, seeing her depart from them, feeling her loneliness and sadness, and realizing that they were two sides of the same coin, despite being opposites by species. He heard a little voice mutter Katsumi as she gently pushed him out of their mental link, and he instantly understood. When he opened his eyes again, he started crying once more, and he saw Katsumi's tears as well. He asked, "You saw my memories too," but they both knew it was a statement. When he saw her nod regretfully, he smiled and said, "It's fine, it's only fair that you could look through my memories if I'm looking through yours." He was pleased to get a positive nod in return. He almost fell when he tried to stand up, so he grabbed onto a tree for support. He could clearly hear Katsumi barking in concern as he approached her and picked her up in his hands. He said, "We need to get you to the hospital to check your back." As he began to limp down a path he saw, "There's the regional professor's lab around here, so we're going there," he said. He was limping when he heard a bark and looked down to see Katsumi pointing at his wounds and giving him a regretful, pointed look. He smiled and said, "I'll get myself fixed up after you. Don't worry about me, and hey, it's not your fault that I'm injured. It's my fault, not yours," until he saw her lick his right hand where she bit him, making him hiss. "Okay, that was your fault," he said, seeing her look down in sadness. "But I don't blame you. You didn't trust me, and everyone would have done the same thing that you did," he said. But she rolled her eyes at him before burying her head into his chest, making him flinch, but understanding the gesture. "Don't worry, Katsumi. You'll be all better soon," he remarked confidently as he limped along faster after seeing the lab in the distance. When he looked back up, Naruto and Katsumi walked to the lab in silence, both of them lost in thought. Naruto had made good use of his time, thinking about the power Katsumi had given him and why he couldn't identify her to any Pokemon he knew about. Although he may have been neglected by his family, he didn't waste it in his room. On the contrary, he usually sneaked into their study and learned about the various varieties of Pokemon that existed in every region from Kanto to Kalos. He had always dreamed about going on a journey with a starter and assembling a team of Pokemon he could trust with his life, but he didn't think those dreams would come true given the way his family treated him. That didn't mean he didn't have hope. He had always assured himself that he would figure out a way to become a trainer. He didn't have a specific dream because he was realistic and knew that his chances of going on a journey were slim, so he didn't want to dream big like other kids and then have it all shattered. Nevertheless, he was growing more and more irritated because he couldn't identify the Pokemon Katsumi. He had a power that some would consider a blessing, while others would consider it a curse. A photographic memory. He knew almost every Pokemon in the universe, but Katsumi appeared and his memory failed him. Because he was constantly reminded of his neglect, Naruto's photographic memory helped him grow up faster than other kids. However, it also greatly aided his academics because he was able to recall every type that existed, every weakness and strength, every move, and more. He didn't just study Pokemon, though, because he realized that knowing about types wouldn't get him very far. With this newfound understanding, he went on to study science from chemistry to biology and learned many other things that would help him in his inevitable journey in life, biology stuff. He also learned how to be strategic, which he knew would be very helpful in the future, especially if he ever had to fight. He tried to determine Katsumi's type, and based on the brown fur covering most of her body, he had a good idea that she was probably a ground type. "Think again," he said, hearing a happy but excited childlike voice in his head that made him jump in surprise and almost drop Katsumi. "Who's there?" he asked, cautiously looking to the right and left to avoid aggravating his wounds. "Down here, silly," he heard again, this time only flinching in surprise as his mind made the connection. "Katsumi?" he asked, looking at her and blinking in surprise when he heard her respond with a happy, "Yep." He saw her look at him with amusement, probably due to his surprised expression. How, he asked, not understanding how a Pokemon who didn't resemble a psychic type was speaking to him in his head. Easy, she replied, I can communicate telepathically because my father was an espion. Well, that answers one question, he thought to himself, but then he heard her laugh. Is that why you've been so quiet these last few minutes? He asked, and all he got in return was a nod. He then remained silent, trying to process the fact that his new friend could speak to him. What are you? He asked as they approached the lab. I am a Pokemon not many people will ever see in their lives. I'm a Zorua, she said with obvious pride, causing him to roll his eyes until he realized what she had said. After a while, he recovered from his shock and asked the one question that had been bothering him while the other was answered with the news of her telepathic abilities. He quickly realized that he was holding one of the most elusive Pokemon ever. He had read about them, of course, but had never seen any pictures of them, leading him to assume that they were merely a myth because they would vanish seconds after being spotted. He didn't have time to question her anymore, so he yelled hello as he entered the lab and sat down to avoid straining his legs. After a few minutes, a woman with orange/brown hair, wearing a white lab coat, a white shirt underneath, and a green skirt came in. She saw him from a distance and asked, "How can I dash?" as she got closer. She stopped as soon as she saw his condition alongside Katsumi's and hurried to get down so she was on his level and started asking him questions. Are you okay? What happened? Do you need medical attention? And is that your Pokemon? She asked. No, I'm not. The storm happened alongside a tree and fire, he said, taking a quick breath before continuing. Take care of Katsumi first and then me, and yes, she's mine. Everything had happened so quickly for him that his mind was unable to handle the mental stress of what had happened in the last few hours, and as a result, he blacked out. The last thing he heard was Katsumi's voice repeatedly saying his name. As Katsumi watched her partner slowly faint from exhaustion, she heard the human woman who was a professor when Naruto called her begin to panic. She felt herself lifted up and began to writhe in an attempt to escape the professor's arms, but she was unsuccessful. She felt the woman run towards the corridor, whispering to her that everything would be all right and that she didn't need to worry any longer. As exhaustion began to catch up with her as well, she sent Naruto one final, remorseful glance, hating the fact that she was powerless to help him and that all she could do was trust this professor to help them both. Professor Juniper had no idea how her day had suddenly become so much more stressful. It had begun so well with a pleasant storm outside, which made her feel calm and ready for another productive day. However, a few hours later, she heard a young person shout hello into her lab. Naturally, she assumed it was just another trainer passing by, so she hurried to see what they wanted, but as she got closer, she saw a child sitting on a chair with a Pokemon in his lap. The child's condition was terrible, so she ran up to him and began questioning him, taking a close look at the Pokemon on his lap and failing to recognize it. This made her frown. After listening to what the boy had to say, she took a good look with him and discovered that he had multiple burns on the left side of his body. Seeing him pass out, she did what the boy had requested and left with the Pokemon in her arms. She hissed in pain as it struggled and scratched her a few times, so she said calmly and quickly, There, you'll be all right soon, don't worry," and was happy to see it stop and pass out. As she arrived at the medical bay, she sent out her Adino, quickly explaining what had happened and asking for her assistance in healing the Pokemon on the bed. While the Adino was busy healing the Pokemon, she returned for the boy, quickly picking him up and noticing the flinch he gave at her touch. She hurried back to the med bay and placed the boy down on one of the beds, and after a quick glance at him, she was impressed that he had remained conscious for as long as he had because the walk to her lab was lengthy. After that, she and Adino spent hours caring for them both. Naturally, they were able to use some potions and Adino's heal pulses to treat the majority of the boy's burns, but they only left his neck untreated because they were unsure of how using any potions or heal pulses would affect his voice box. Instead, they bandaged his neck to prevent infection. Following that, they focused entirely on the mystery Pokemon. They quickly took an X-ray and discovered several broken bones in her hind feet. She sighed, relieved that the injuries weren't as severe as she had feared because she knew that, with the right care, they could heal in a few days. As a result, they were relieved that the boy and his Pokemon would both survive. After thanking Adino for her help, Juniper returned to her desk and began researching the mystery Pokemon. Only a few days later, Naruto would awaken and find himself staring around a room he had never been in before. He attempted to sit up, but was instantly stopped by a burning pain in his chest, which caused him to stop moving and gasp for air before he could sit up completely. He was greeted by warm, cream-colored walls that, for the first time in his life, made him feel welcome. He looked to his right and saw a brown ball of fur, and it took him a moment to realize that it was Katsumi, which, like a trigger, caused several memories of what had happened to flash through his mind. He promptly closed his eyes and began to sort through his mind so he would know what had happened. He was so focused on his work that he failed to notice the professor entering the room. She naturally watched him and eventually announced her presence by clearing her throat, which startled Naruto and caused him to jump, open his eyes, and look at the professor in obvious surprise. So, the professor said, "How about we start with introductions and then questions later?" He smiled softly in return, and although he didn't know the woman personally, he knew that she had assisted him and Katsumi with their injuries, so he let his face show some emotion. The professor, of course, realized who she was speaking to and was quite surprised, but she didn't show it because she didn't want to frighten him. "Well, you could call me Professor Juniper or Oreya, Naruto," she said in a kind tone. "Why don't you go first?" she asked, and he nodded. "My name is Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki, and you miss?" he asked politely and confidently, even though it hurt his throat. The lady must have realized, too, because she passed him a cup of water and he nodded gratefully. They struck up a conversation after the introductions, and once she felt he was at ease with her, she began questioning him about how he got burned and the rest of his little adventure. She wouldn't lie. She was shocked to learn that this child could do so much and still stand, let alone walk. She told him about his injuries after hearing his story, and he was happy to hear that they had healed so quickly. However, he was horrified to hear about the scarring on his neck. She changed his bandages while they were speaking, and she was shocked to see that she could almost see Naruto's entire rib cage. It was incomprehensible that the son of two famous and wealthy people could be so thin and undernourished, but she wasn't going to question him about it, so Naruto thanked her. She then asked him a question she was desperate to know the answer to. "What's that Pokemon you brought with you? I can't identify it at first glance, and even after hours of research, I still come up with blanks." She saw a look of understanding cross his face and waited for his response. "Even I didn't know what Pokemon Katsumi was until she told me she has psychic powers," he said quickly as he saw her open her mouth to ask him. "She told me she was a Zorua, a shiny too." After he said that, he couldn't help but laugh when he saw her look surprised. "Yep, I had the same reaction," he told her. "If the rumors are accurate, she's also a dark type, not some ground type," he thought to himself. Juniper continued to be shocked when she said, "But I thought that they were myths. Nobody has ever presented any proof of them, and only a handful have seen them." Naruto simply nodded in agreement before responding, "That's what I had thought too, but all we can do is trust that she is telling the truth," and was pleased to get her nod of understanding. Since Katsumi had shown him her memories in confidence, and he knew that something so significant should be kept a secret because he knew that there were many sick people out there who would do anything to have a Pokemon from the Zorua line. He naturally knew that Katsumi was telling the truth because he had seen hundreds of Zorua and Zoroark and had seen her memories. When Juniper realized how late it was, she told Naruto that he should also get some sleep, which he gladly accepted. She then left him alone in the room with the lights off. He lay back down and closed his eyes when he felt something move on his bed, and when he opened one eye, he saw Katsumi curling up into his body. He simply grinned and mentally said, "Night, Katsumi," knowing that she had heard him. Naturally, Katsumi had been awake the entire time. She would have greeted Naruto, but she knew he needed some time to process what had happened because she had seen his mind herself and knew how it worked. She was annoyed by the professor's arrival because she couldn't talk to Naruto while she was around, so she decided to listen to their conversation instead. As the conversation went on, she was glad that Naruto didn't mention their memory exchange, demonstrating to her that she had put her trust in the right person. As night fell and the professor left, she realized how empty and cold her bed was, so she jumped onto Naruto's bed with her almost healed legs and cuddled him, happy to hear his voice in her head again before she slept a night full of dreams. The following morning, Naruto and Katsumi both awoke to the smell of food. After exchanging confused looks, they followed the scent, which left them stunned. As they turned a corner, they noticed a table full of food, and to their surprise, Oreya was standing behind it, grinning as she observed their shocked looks. "Come on, Naruto, I've made breakfast for the both of you," she said. "But why did you make so much?" he asked in a clearly confused tone. "I've seen your chest, Naruto, and you need food, that's why," she said sternly. Katsumi, of course, had also seen his chest yesterday and was appalled. She had vowed then and there that she would tear his parents' faces open when she met them as retaliation for what they had done to him. As those thoughts were running through Katsumi's mind, Naruto was left stunned as he stared without realizing he was crying. Juniper approached him with a worried expression on his face and comforted him by giving him a hug. It took a few minutes for Naruto to calm down, and when he did, Juniper began to question him about why he broke down. He explained to her his life, how his parents hated him, how he was forgotten, and everything else that had made his brief life a living hell. Halfway through his explanation, he began to cry again as all his pent-up emotions were finally able to be released. Juniper was still perplexed as to why he was crying, and when she asked him, he responded with tears and begged her not to take him back. The professor was appalled by Naruto's life and felt sorry for him. Knowing that she had the opportunity to change his life, she asked him a question that would change theirs. "Why don't you live here with me then, Naruto?" He shook his head and gave her a frown in response. "I can't do that, Professor. I don't want to be a burden," he said, turning away. But then he felt her grab his chin and smiled, saying, "Don't be silly, you'll never be a burden to me." Are you sure?" he repeated, aware that this was a significant matter. But all he received was a smile and a nod, which ultimately caused him to smile back through his tears. Everything in Naruto and Katsumi's lives had changed after that fateful day. At first, it was a little awkward for them all because Naruto had never lived with someone who truly cared for him, but he was quickly adjusting. Katsumi had never lived with two humans before, but she was able to adjust quite easily with Naruto by her side. Juniper also struggled with the changes because she had to take care of a child now, though she never showed it. He also knew that she didn't know how to approach him, so they hardly spoke, and when they did, it was still very difficult for both of them. This continued for a while until Oreya noticed Naruto reading about dark types and how to care for them in her library while Katsumi was resting on his lap. Naturally, Juniper saw this as a chance to connect with him as she could support his studies as a regional professor. After hours of conversation, she discovered that Naruto had a photographic memory and had recently begun studying the Mind Arts Trio. She was shocked to learn that a 7-year-old was studying ghosts, psychics, and dark types, so she asked him about it and was pleasantly surprised to hear that he had a new dream in which he was a type specialist. He first studied dark types, then psychics, and ghost Pokemon. She was all for it because only a few people could ever understand how to deal with the trio, and no one had ever attempted to specialize in all three before. Seeing this as a way to build a relationship with him, she asked if he would like to be her apprentice, and Naruto readily accepted the offer, knowing that such a chance wouldn't come around again. Following this, Naruto and Juniper spent months reading books, accounts of everything, and anything written about psychics, ghosts, and dark types. Naruto learned a lot of new things and was happy with his progress, even though he knew he still had a lot to learn about Pokemon. Their bond grew over the many hours they spent together, and it gradually turned into a sibling relationship. It was incredible for Naruto as he began to feel like he belonged, and thanks to Juniper, he realized he now had a family. Katsumi was also not forgotten during that period. As soon as Naruto's apprenticeship began, they sneaked out in the early morning and late evening to learn how to battle. It was an experiment to see how well he and Katsumi worked together, and he wouldn't lie, the rush of fighting the wild Pokemon was addictive. This solidified his belief that being a battler was what he wanted to do on his journey because he felt it suited him more than anything else. He also felt more alive in a battle and more in sync with Katsumi. He felt their bond grow during battle, but like all good things, they had to end it when Katsumi became too strong for the nearby Pokemon. When October finally arrived, it was Naruto's birthday. It wasn't a big celebration, but it was special for him because it was the first time he had ever celebrated it in his life. He didn't receive many gifts, but as long as his two precious people were with him, he was happy. Soon after the new year began, Naruto and Katsumi had started their first steps towards greatness. They began training together, with Naruto joining Katsumi. When asked why he did this, he would always respond, "It makes us closer and shows to her that we're equals, not master and servant," which earned him a smile from his sister. Naruto began learning about camping and survival throughout the year so that he would be ready for his journey. He also began writing papers on the fundamentals of caring for the Mind Arts trio, but only because his sister asked him to, and he didn't want to let her down. Little did he know that Juniper was sharing the papers with her colleagues, who in turn shared them with gym leaders and Elite Fours who were experts in those kinds of Pokemon. Naturally, this made them all wonder who would write something so accurate, and when questioned, Juniper was too happy to boast about her brother/apprentice. This also made Naruto famous, even though he was unaware of it. Fast forward to October. Katsumi asked, "Do you think we'll find anything good to fight?" as Naruto and Katsuki strolled through the forest that surrounded their lab on another sunny morning. Naruto was dressed in a white shirt with a black jacket on top that had several white lines on it and loose black pants with the same pattern. "Fire!" A dark pulse into the sky, he said, only to get a nod and see her raise her head and shoot a beam of black energy into the sky. This was obviously a simple way to signal that they were challenging whatever bird was nearby. As they continued walking, they felt the trees around them move as if there was wind, making both Naruto and Katsumi freeze because they could tell that a powerful flying type was nearby. They waited for their challenger, but they heard nothing and saw nothing. As they prepared to leave, a huge shadow fell upon them, and when they looked up, they saw a huge bird with feathers that were bright red, blue, yellow, and white. Naruto recognized the eagle right away, and he was extremely surprised because he hadn't expected to see one so near the lab. "What is it?" he asked. Braviary was his unexpected response to Katsumi's question, and she immediately grasped it. "So, what's the plan, Nara?" she inquired. "What?" she inquired. He responded, "All we can do is fight it or lead it back the lab," making it clear that they had to defeat it or face Juniper when she gets angry. They had already done so once and had vowed never to enrage her again. She nodded, and he began giving orders, saying, "Dark Pulse, and if he gets close, use Feint Attack." She fired the beam right away, missing the bird as it dodged. Since she already knew what Naruto was planning, she fired several dark pulses without Naruto's warning when she saw it begin to dive down towards them. The move didn't have much power, but it was difficult for Pokemon to dodge because they were typically overwhelmed by the large amounts that were fired. They were pleased to see at least 3 hit it before it flew up and tried again, this time gaining the outline for a quick attack, believing it would do the same thing again. When he saw what had happened, Naruto yelled to Katsumi, "Protect," since the Braviary had smashed into it with Aerial Ace a second after she had used it. Smartbird, he thought, not shocked because he knew their species was known for being swift, violent, and intelligent. Fortunately, Katsumi was only pushed back. She was unable to unwind, though, as she felt it hit her Protect several more times. Naruto realized right away that Katsumi couldn't hold for long and began to give orders, shouting, "Katsumi, don't panic, use your ears and you'll be able to pinpoint his location after you do use a feint attack." Knowing that Katsumi's hearing was so good that she could hear from miles away, he had no doubt that she would locate her opponent in a matter of seconds. "Katsumi," he yelled in alarm as he ran towards her. "Are you okay? Katsumi, you hear me?" he said in a tremulous voice, but she responded with a "ow," which made him sigh in relief. He watched as Katsumi stood motionless, dropping her Protect and turning right, her left claw glowing with dark-type energy. A few seconds later, she swiped it and she flew past him into a tree. He grunted as he sat there watching her to see whether she was hurt as she attempted to rise up, and when he turned to look behind him, he saw the Braviary soar up away from their position. "Naruto." When he felt an iron-tasting liquid seeping out of his mouth, he put his hand close to it to wipe it away and discovered it was blood. Realizing what had happened, he turned to face Katsumi and muttered a sorry before passing out. The last thing he saw was a bright light covering Katsumi. He heard Katsumi shout in concern. Katsumi felt something snap in her as she watched her brother, who was all but dead, go unconscious. She saw a bright light surround her, and as she closed her eyes, she recalled all of their memories together, including how they first met that stormy night, all of their fun times over the past year, their training, and their in-depth conversations. She felt dread well up in her, anger rise at her weakness, and she felt like a failure for not protecting her other half. When she opened her eyes again, she did the only thing that made sense to her in her angry state. She leaped as high as she could and used her newfound flamethrower to shoot the Braviary. She did this while thinking absently about how she and Naruto would perfect the move and learn all the ins and outs of it as they did with all of their moves. As she watched the bird burn and fall to the ground, she felt the anger in her leave and remembered Naruto's condition. In a matter of seconds, she put her head to his chest to check for a pulse, picked him up, and ran towards the lab. When she got there, she let out a roar, unconsciously letting it out, and it sounded deeper and more mature. She had a flashback while she waited for the professor, and she saw the professor running up to her with a shocked expression before spotting Naruto and telling her to follow him. She was screaming for help, but this time it was for her brother, not for herself. Knowing that she couldn't assist Naruto, she followed instructions and placed him on his stomach, exposing his back and wounds while she watched as the professor and Adino began to treat him. When she realized that everything was under control, she let out a sigh and leaned against a wall. She glanced at her arms, which were gray, and her claws, which were purple. When she looked across the room for the mirror, which she knew was there, she was shocked to see a Zoroark rather than a Zorua. She quickly overcame this and gleefully examined herself, noting that her entire body was dark gray, that her mane was now brown rather than the black she had previously had, and that she had a huge amount of purple hair, with spiky parts that were brown and the bottom part of it having some brown and some purple. When she heard the professor's voice, she immediately stopped examining herself. "Is that you, Katsumi?" she asked, but received a blank stare in return, which made her realize that it was a right dumb question. Katsumi beat her to it and, for the first time, spoke to her telepathically, asking, "Is Naruto going to be okay?" "He is, but you're going to tell me why he's so injured in the first place," she said sharply, and was happy to receive a terrified nod in return. She inquired swiftly and received a response that she didn't want to answer. As they went to see if Katsumi had any issues with her evolution, she revealed what had happened and that they had been slinking away for months, which infuriated Juniper. "Come, you'll tell me what happened while I check if anything bad happened to you after you evolved," Juniper said. Naruto woke up quickly and realized he was in the medical bay once more. He sat up slowly this time, but he didn't feel much pain, thinking, probably because of all the potions that were used on me. He felt a lot of weight on his lower half, so when he looked, he was surprised to see a lot of purple hair. His confusion didn't last long, though, because the bright light surrounding Katsumi's body and the strange fox's worried expression pointed to one creature, Katsumi, he whispered in surprise and wonder. They sat in comfortable silence until Naruto jumped off his bed and began to congratulate Katsumi on her evolution. They spoke for a while before Juniper came in and worried about Naruto before banging his head in for not telling her what they were doing. He was happy to see her get off his bed, but he was surprised when she hugged him with her hair moving around him as if trying to protect him. He heard her whisper, "I was worried there, Naruto, you scared me," and was even more shocked to see tears streaming down her cheeks. Naturally, Naruto accepted this as his punishment since he knew it would occur at any moment. After a week, on Naruto's birthday, a week after Katsumi's evolution, he had spent his time recuperating and assisting Katsumi in acclimating to her new form and move. They had already mastered the flamethrower and were now working on Katsumi's proficiency with it. Naturally, they had examined her other moves to see that her Dark Pulse could be launched in less than a second and sustained for a longer period of time than when she was a Zorua. Katsumi had promised to get Naruto a gift because it was his birthday today, and he now had the ability to take on everything that lived in the surrounding forest and mountains. He didn't want her to go, but he let her go so he could spend time with his sister Juniper. Juniper had been considerate about her gifts and had given Naruto a mask that would cover his neck and the lower half of his face because she knew he didn't like people seeing his burns, Kakashi's mask, but black. She had also gotten him something that she knew would make him very happy. Speaking of Naruto, he was sitting on the lab's roof wearing his mask and the same clothes from the previous week, but he had washed them. The roof was one of his safe havens because only he came up here, and that was only to think. He knew he only had a year left before turning 10 and that he had to begin his journey, but he wasn't worried about that. Instead, he was worried about what name to use because his old family, who are all Namakazes, hadn't even tried to find him in the previous 2 years, and although he liked the Uzumaki name, it made him think of his mother. As he returned to the lab, he thought to himself, "Screw it. I'll figure it out some other day." Katsumi hurried through the forest because she didn't have much time left before Naruto's birthday and she had promised him something nice. She wasn't sure why she said that because they both knew it would be uncommon to find anything valuable in the wild, but she inherited Naruto's stubbornness and ran until she found something. When she stopped, she noticed several mountain entrances and decided to run because she had a feeling she would find something worthwhile there. She was thankful that she was a dark type because they all had excellent vision in the dark. As she continued walking and the light from the entrance went out, she began to believe that she would find nothing. However, as she was about to leave, she noticed something shining down the tunnel and was drawn to it. She approached it and used her newfound strength to pull it out, blowing on it to get rid of the dust. To her surprise, she discovered that it was a dusk stone, which she remembered Naruto telling her about them and how they could help evolve specific dark-type Pokemon. She thought it was correct because she could feel dark-type energy radiating out of it. But as she turned to leave, she was shocked to see another Pokemon sitting there, watching her with interest. Naruto explained that it was just a stone that had absorbed shadows and darkness from its surroundings, giving it the power to evolve Pokemon with it, especially dark types, as it simply gave them a boost to their already powerful dark type powers, making them evolve. She nearly dropped the stone in surprise. An Absol, she thought, recognizing the Pokemon in front of her. It had a blue face with a blue horn protruding on the side of its head, white fur covering its entire body, and red eyes that inspected her. "What is your business here?" she asked in a calm female voice, knowing she couldn't lie. "I came to look for a gift for a friend of mine," Katsumi replied immediately, making her appear suspicious. "Why would your friend want a dusk stone?" The female Absol merely gave her an amused look before saying, "Because you in my territory?" Katsumi said with smugness evident in her tone. "Damn it!" Katsumi mentally swore. When Katsumi failed to respond, Absol went on. "So I want to know what a Zoroark is truly doing here." Katsumi simply snarled as she realized she was being questioned. "I've already told you why I'm here," she said, gritting her teeth. "So is that stone a gift to another Pokemon or that blonde boy you always with?" she asked curiously. This made Katsumi freeze, not knowing how Absol had known. The only plausible explanation was that she had spied them. "I'm not gonna stop you," she said, smiling. "I'm just here to give you a message which you will pass on to him," she concluded threateningly. With gritted teeth and narrowed eyes, Katsumi asked, "What's the message?" Absol, aware that she needed to act quickly to avoid being attacked by the Zoroark, told her, "Tell him I said, when you begin your journey, get ready to fight the bringer of disasters, and if you win, she will announce you as her new master. Got that?" Katsumi asked expectantly, but received a stiff nod in return. "Good," she said in a pleased tone before leaving the Zoroark to gather its thoughts. She was pleased to hear it exclaim a "what" in shock. Knowing that it would take a few hours to return to the lab, Katsumi fled out of the tunnel and into the woods after she recovered from her shock. She was aware that Naruto would be happy to hear the news, but she was still shocked that they were being spied on for however long. She had intended to tell him alone because the Absol had specifically instructed her to do so, and she didn't want to ruin this opportunity for him by telling anyone else. While waiting for Katsumi to return so they could celebrate his birthday, Naruto sat in the kitchen with a cake in front of him. "What do you think is taking her so long?" he asked Juniper, who was seated across the table. "No idea. She probably got distracted by something shiny," he replied, and they both laughed at his joke. As their laughter subsided, he felt Katsumi's psychic abilities connect to his mind, and a sardonic voice said, "Haha, keep on laughing and you won't get your present." "Crap," he cursed, forgetting that Katsumi had extraordinary hearing. "Sorry," he said, aware that he had been caught red-headed. She ran into the kitchen a few seconds later with a frustrated expression on her face, and Naruto just half laughed and gave her an apology hug. "So, now that we are all here, why don't we start with the gifts?" Juniper said, receiving a nod from the other two. Before she could say anything else, Katsumi put her hand in her hair and then jerked out a purple stone, causing both Naruto and Juniper to widen their eyes in shock. "A dusk tone," Juniper said, and Naruto followed up by saying, "So you did get distracted by a shiny stone." Following their exchange, they turned to Aurea and saw her holding back a huge smile. "So," Naruto urged, and she gave him a piece of paper from Juniper. As he read it, he began to cry slowly, and when he finished, he got up, walked around the table to Juniper, and repeatedly thanked her. Naruto had accepted the stone and said a brief thank you for giving him such a rare gift. "Thank you for everything, Aurea," Naruto said with such gratitude that it caused even Aurea to cry. After their brief moment, they celebrated for an additional hour before everyone went to bed. Well, only the professor did, as Naruto and Katsumi went on the roof to talk. Katsumi read the paper in confusion as she watched this and dropped it in surprise. It read that Naruto's new name was Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki Juniper. "What is it?" asked Naruto gravely, and Katsumi mimicked his expression before answering. "I didn't get held up because of the stone, it was something else." She paused to see Naruto giving her his full attention before continuing. "It was another Pokemon. She told me she wanted me to pass on a message to you." She stopped because she knew he had a question. "What Pokemon?" "You'll see," she said, before continuing, "and if you win, you will be her new master." Knowing that they were being watched, Katsumi looked around while she awaited Naruto's reaction. Naruto was attempting to interpret the message to determine which Pokemon had challenged him. There is no bringer of disaster, he thought, just a protector who tries to warn people of disasters, which is an Absol. However, he considered the following: unless it thinks that I am like the rest of the world and think of it as a bad omen, it would also explain why it didn't challenge me now. It doesn't know how I would react. I'm probably the only one she's deemed worthy of being her master, so she must be scared. He looked up at Katsumi and saw that she was looking around, which helped him realize that the Absol was close by. With confidence, he said, "An Absol would be amazing Pokemon to have as a partner," thinking deep down, "They've been done wrong by the world in my opinion. They're not evil, they're protectors, and I would be pleased to have one join our little family." Katsumi quickly realized what he was doing and grinned at her partner's unconventional thinking and refusal to conform to social norms. "You truly are worthy of being my master," she thought. "Even if you do lose in our fight, I will still join you," before bowing in respect to Naruto and departing. When they returned to the lab, they did not see the same Absol from before standing there, looking at them with hope and happiness in her eyes. Fast forward to January of the next year. Now that he knew what his next Pokemon would be, Naruto started studying more. He knew that he had only 10 months left before his birthday, so he and Katsumi tripled their training because they needed to be prepared for Absol and other potential obstacles on their journey. They practiced a lot of moves until they discovered the ones that would work best for Katsumi, which were Flamethrower, Dark Pulse, Aerial Ace, and Protect. Since he was aware that many Dark-type Pokemon were dual types and had their own needs, Naruto stopped studying the Mind Arts trio and concentrated on the other types. When he told his sister that he wanted to study and learn about the other types, she was happy to assist since she would know that her little brother was safe in the wild and wouldn't have to worry about him as much as other people did with their families. The months passed swiftly, and both Katsumi and Naruto became stronger and smarter as a result. Naruto's photographic memory was a boon since, with Katsumi's help and Orea's love for him, the previous 3 years had mended his shattered heart. Soon, it was October once more, and this time, before Orea went to bed, Naruto approached her, gave her a big hug, a small thank you, and a gift. A necklace shaped like the Ein sign with pieces of fire, water, and electric stones inside. She put it on and asked why he had given it to her, and he replied that he had one too, and that his was in the shape of the Yang sign. He gave her the Ein as a reminder of himself and his dream of becoming a Dark-type master, while he received the Yang as a reminder of the light she brought into his life. Later, before they went to bed, Naruto thanked Katsumi for everything and made a lifelong commitment to be her partner, exactly like she had done a year earlier. When Naruto woke up, he was delighted because he knew that today would be the day he left for his Pokemon adventure with Katsumi. They had only dreamed of this moment, so he was thrilled when it finally came true. Naruto got out of bed and woke up Katsumi, who was sleeping on the ground. 5 more minutes, she said, half slumbering, but he was in a good mood, so he let her sleep in. As he was leaving his room, he picked up his journey clothes and headed to the shower, where he spent 20 minutes. He walked out to find Katsumi leaning against his door, examining him. "Well, what do you think?" he asked, taking a quick spin to show her what he was wearing. A black mask that completely covered his neck and the bottom of his face, a black turtleneck that made him look smart, black jeans that were meant to last for a long time. and a haori that covered his entire body down to his ankles. The combination of white, gold, and cream colors gave off a cozy vibe. To top it off, his blonde hair was still disheveled. He saw her nod in agreement as he looked at her. Not bad, she thought to herself, unconsciously letting Naruto hear her thoughts, which made him laugh. As they made their way to the kitchen for breakfast, he heard his sister call his name. Since they wouldn't be able to eat anything, Naruto sent Katsumi there to get some food. When he turned to go to the lab's entrance to see what his sister wanted, he wondered about the Absol who had been watching them for a year. He only knew this because Katsumi had been able to sense her several times. He just hoped it wouldn't take too long for them to meet because he was excited to meet her. He stopped thinking about it when he saw his sister looking at him with a worried but angry face. "What's up?" he asked worriedly, and as she opened her mouth to answer him, he heard another woman's voice say, "What do you mean, what's up?" which made him freeze because it sounded so familiar. He turned to his left and saw his mother standing there with teary red eyes, while his siblings looked at him pity and his father stared at him in shock. Aurea woke up that morning with a sense of sadness because she would miss her little brother, but she also knew that he had to go on this journey because he could accomplish things that no one else had done before. She hurriedly left her room to get ready, and after a long time, she entered her office to get the last gift she had for Naruto. She was suddenly filled with dread because she knew that the lab wouldn't be as bright as it usually was without Naruto around. As she looked down, she saw the necklace that Naruto had made for her as a sign that he would always be there for her. So she left her office with a smile on her face and a positive attitude, knowing that he would always be there for her. When she arrived at the main entrance, she was greeted by the Namikaze family who were standing in her lab. Knowing that they needed something, she forced a smile and asked, "Minato, Kushina, how can I help you?" in an attempt to sound friendly. For the most part, it worked as Minato replied, "We've come here to get Mito and Menma's starter Pokemon. You promised us a couple of months ago that you would have them ready." She knew what he was talking about, so she hurriedly stepped behind a desk to retrieve a case that held 2 Pokeballs. Minato was specific about the Pokemon his kids would receive, so it was a stressful week for her, but she had done her job. "I only have 2 Pokemon as you asked. Does that mean your second son Naruto already has a Pokemon?" she asked politely, knowing that she could play a practical joke on them. She was pleased to see the instant looks of surprise on Minato's and Kushina's faces while the children took a moment to realize, causing her to frown. Despite this, they were still able to recall Naruto and had expressed their surprise at her remark. With a nod from Juniper, Minato said, "Ah, could you give me and Kushina a moment while the kids meet their Pokemon?" As soon as Minato led his wife outside the lab, he felt her embrace him while crying. "What have we done, Minato?" She sobbed, "We don't even know where he is, and now that I think about it, I haven't seen him around the house in years." What they didn't realize was that they were talking so loudly that the children could hear them. Menma and Mito looked down in shame when they heard what their mother had said, but Aurea instantly got a frown on her face and said, "You forgot him," with a tone that was full of anger and disgust. When Aurea realized they had been caught, they tried to defuse the situation, but it only made it worse because she wasn't going to accept any excuse for them practically leaving her brother. As she stood there listening to their excuse, she wondered how Naruto would react when she saw them. So she turned to the hallway and yelled, "Naruto," without thinking, making everyone in the room freeze in shock, including herself. She didn't have time to think about it because she saw Naruto enter with a worried expression. "What's up?" he asked, and as she opened her mouth to speak, she felt as though the air in her throat had disappeared. It didn't really matter, though, because she heard Kushina say in a feeble voice, "What do you mean, what's up?" She saw him freeze and turned to face them in shock. They stood there for what seemed like hours, but it was only a few seconds before Kushina rushed towards him, her arms outstretched, aiming for an embrace, but his expression quickly changed to one of annoyance and anger as Naruto moved out of her way. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice clearly angry. Kushina was shocked that her own son would speak to her in such a way, so she tried to preserve some pride by saying, "Don't talk to me with such a tone." She was equally angry to see her son look at her in shock before he said, "A bit late for you to tell me what to do." Her mother gave him a hurt look. When Naruto's siblings saw how their brother was treating their mother, they both became irritated. "Shown some respect to your mother," Mito yelled in order to make her point as her mother had taught her to, and Menma nodded in agreement. He then turned back to face their mother without showing any emotion and said, "You need to get one thing straight. I'm not your son." He then turned to face his siblings and added, "I'm not your brother either. I'm just someone who shares the same blood as you. Nothing more, nothing less." He felt his arm being pulled as he finished speaking and started to approach Uraya. When he turned around, he saw Kushina's enraged face. "Now you listen here, Sochi. I may not have been in your life, but I'm still your mother and you will dash." She stopped talking when she felt sharp claws pointed at her neck. She froze, hearing a frozen voice in her head say, "If you do not let go of Naruto, I will skewer you. Do you understand me?" As if reading her mind, the Pokemon she suspected sharpened its claws with dark energy and questioned again, "Do you understand?" in a sluggish, animal-like manner, making her even more irate than before. Knowing that she had no control over the situation, Kushina just nodded and released Naruto. As she released him, she felt pushed aside and watched as a fox-like Pokemon ran past her and began examining Naruto's arm. "It's fine, Katsumi," Naruto said calmly, aware that she must have sensed his anger and distress at seeing his family. He knew that she was upset and that one of his words could make her angry. "I'm not hurt. She didn't hurt me, see?" he said, showing her his arm and being relieved to see her sag. He simply smiled and ran his hand through her purple hair to express his gratitude for her protective instincts. And Katsumi was overjoyed to receive his gratitude because she always enjoyed Naruto's scratches. He heard Katsumi say, "Don't even call them that," and he nodded to her, reassured that he was safe because Katsumi would never allow anything to happen to him, as evidenced by the fact that she was looking at his former family with eagle eyes. He turned to face Uraya, who was still frozen, and he answered for her, saying, "This is Katsumi, a shiny Zoroark and my partner." He looked at them as he said this, and saw Kushina crying, while his father looked down in shame alongside his siblings. Juniper broke out of her frozen state and said, "How about Mito and Menma take their Pokemon and leave, as I'm busy and Naruto has to begin his own journey?" The only response she received was a few nods before the Pokeballs were taken from her hand and they left, with Kushina giving Naruto several glances as they heard the Namake's car start up. They all sighed with relief that the stressful situation had finally come to an end. When Naruto turned to Uraya, he received an incredibly tight hug, and as he put his arms around her, he heard her repeatedly apologize for calling him over. He quickly reassured her, telling her that it was truly okay and that he didn't hold it against her. "I don't want to travel the Unova region knowing that Minato has so much power over it, and I don't want to deal with my siblings on my journey. So I'm thinking about going to a different region. Think that will be possible?" he said quickly after they had been talking for a few minutes to give Uraya time to calm down. "Yep, I could set it up for you, but you'd have to leave today. Think you could wait a little bit longer?" he asked. He said, "Yes," and then went on, "While you set that up for me, Katsumi and I have to go deal with something. We'll be back soon, don't worry," before getting up, kissing her on the forehead, and running into the forest with Katsumi. She didn't know what he was doing, but she trusted him and began arranging Naruto's flight because of this. "Do you think the Absol will be there?" Naruto asked Katsumi in his head as he sprinted toward an open area where they trained. They observed a white-furred Pokemon waiting for them as they approached the field, but all he got in return was a nod that made him roll his eyes. Naruto was stunned when they arrived at the field and saw the Absol staring at them. Having only seen photographs of it, he had never seen it in person, so it was an honor to see it up close. He glanced at her and said, "It seems that you've been waiting for us," to which she nodded. Knowing that it was itching to fight, he looked at Katsumi and saw that she was nodding in his direction, so he mentally ordered flamethrower. He was pleased to see a jet of flames fly out of her mouth and towards Absol, and as it approached, the Absol vanished before appearing in front of Katsumi with its horn glowing with dark energy. With adrenaline coursing through his veins and his mind sharper than ever, as had always happened when he was in combat, he gave the quick succession of orders: drop to the ground and then counter with aerial ace. He was pleased to see Katsumi stop spitting out flames and immediately fell on her back, allowing Absol to fly past her before leaping back up with the speed he had gained from years of training and punching it with her right claw that was glowing white, indicating the use of aerial ace. The Absol flew to the right where Katsumi swung, and he heard it howl in pain before ordering another flamethrower. As it hit a tree and stopped Katsumi from falling, he said, "Absol, give up. The battle hasn't been long, but you've been hit with 2 strong moves, and I don't want you getting hurt any more than you have to." He waited for her to respond, and was happy to see that she nodded her head in agreement. As he moved forward towards her, he felt his sense of danger go off, and ducked, just missing Absol's horn as it attempted to slash at him. He heard a cry of pain the next second and glanced over his shoulder to see her lying on the ground with Katsumi on top of her and a flamethrower, ready to be launched. He hurried to Katsumi and told her to calm down as fast as he could, but he saw her look murderous at the thought of releasing the Absol after it had attempted to harm him. He had assured her that it was just a test of his abilities, and he knew that she would attack him like any other good Dark-type Pokemon would. He was aware that Dark-type Pokemon were dangerous and untrustworthy in the wild, but after being trained and having you as their master, they developed a strong loyalty to you and would sacrifice their lives for you. He was unconcerned since he knew the Absol was merely testing his knowledge. "So," he started, "am I worthy of being your master, bringer of disasters?" As he was about to put her in a Pokeball game, he said, "By the way, I'm not your master, Absol. I'm your friend and partner. I'm someone who will see you as a part of his family." He finished with a smile, and he saw Absol's look of surprise and bewilderment melt away into a smile before she closed her eyes. While she was engrossed in the Pokeball game, he glanced at Kasumi and noticed that she was turning away from him, giving him angry looks for not allowing her to finish their fight. He simply laughed and said, "It's okay, you'll be able to fight her as much as you want to now that she's part of the team," finishing his statement with a cheeky grin that changed to a smile when he saw her laugh. He was shocked to see Orea's car outside with his bag already in it when they returned to the lab. "Hey!" he called to her, waking her from her reverie. "Oh, back so soon," she said, receiving a nod in return. "Yep, and with a welcome teammate too," he replied, observing her bewildered expression. "Could you put her in the healing machine? I'll tell you all about it." After getting a nod, he began to explain what had happened and was pleased to see her look at him with pride because catching Absol was never easy. After a few minutes of waiting, he returned Absol's Pokeball and let her go. He sat down so that they were both the same height to demonstrate their equality, and the Pokemon nodded gratefully. He then introduced himself to Absol, telling her about his dream and his expectations of her, which were minimal, asking her to protect their family because he knew that their species was in fact protective. Something he had learned from Katsumi when she told him that humans were mistaken in their perceptions of Absols, which led Naruto to agree. Absol wouldn't lie, she was surprised that her new master understood her species so well and how important they were to the world. Unlike what other humans thought of them, she felt honored that she was being given such an important role by her master. And she promised him there and then that she would protect the family that he built. She knew that only the fox that was so close to her new master understood her, but she also knew that her new master was smart and would know what she meant. When she placed her paw on his chest, she knew that her master had already placed a large amount of trust in her, as not many people would allow a freshly caught Pokemon to get so close to their most important organ, their heart. She felt honored that he was already trusting her, and so she promised herself that she would follow him into Giratina's dimension if she had to. She had already given her boy her loyalty a year ago on that fateful night, and she knew that he was the right person for her, as she had seen enough of him to understand that he was a good person. Naruto was pleased with their introductions and turned to face Katsumi. "Could you tell her that I would like to know her name?" he said. He watched as Absol gave a look of comprehension before snarling something back, and he looked back at Katsumi expectantly as she mentioned the name of his second family member and defender, Ruby, before she began barking at him. "Ruby fits you well, it's a beautiful name," he said, turning back to her. He smiled as he saw the Absol's happy expression. As he was wrapping up a conversation with his new teammate, he heard footsteps and looked up to see the professor asking if he was ready to head to the airport. He nodded and sent Katsumi and Ruby back to their Pokeballs, promising to let them out when they arrived at their new location. As Naruto and Oreya headed to the car, he asked her where she was sending him and was disappointed to hear that it was a secret. He scowled but chose to believe his sister and so put it out of their minds. They drove silently towards the airport, both of them knowing that these would be their last few moments together, so they treasured the moment. Eventually, they arrived at a place where they both stood motionless, taking in everything around them. This was something Naruto had learned from Oreya because it was something she did when she was anxious. Juniper sighed and turned to say goodbye to Naruto, and as she looked at him, she was shocked to see him embrace her with tears in his eyes. It had been a long time since he had done so, but she understood why. She gave him a hug in return, realizing that it was difficult for him. Eventually, he released his grip and looked up as Juniper playfully asked, "When you reach Kanto, you'll be greeted by Professor Oak. Be nice, all right?" The only thing she could do in response to the nod and the thank you for everything she had done for him was to give him another hug and whisper, "Go show the world what you can do, Naruto. I'll be rooting for you." She ended the hug by pulling away and winking at him, which he returned. She watched him board the plane, and just before he left her view, she noticed him smile softly at her through his mask. "Good luck, Naruto. I know you'll make me proud," she muttered to herself as she watched his plane take off. After his fifth nap, Naruto realized that it was a long flight and that he was going to a distant area, but he found it boring to sit in the same seat for hours on end. He sighed as he looked out his window and realized it was already nighttime, so he pulled out his national Pokédex and flicked it open for the first time, and to his surprise, it revealed itself as Junior Professor Naruto Juniper's Pokédex. He was shocked that his sister had granted him this privilege without even telling him. Knowing that there was nothing he could do, he sighed and began to scroll through it, mentally listing the dark types he wanted on his team. After a few minutes, he accidentally clicked and saw that it opened a new tab. After reading it, he realized that he could hold up to 2 entire teams of 6 on him if he so desired. This made him look ecstatic and drastically altered his plans for what Pokemon he would catch and keep. With those final thoughts, he went to sleep after quickly realizing what time it was and that he should put all of this preparation for another time because he had to wake up early tomorrow. A few hours later, he was awakened by a tap on his shoulder. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the flight attendant had informed him that they had already touched down in Kanto and that he was among the few passengers still on board. Upon realizing what this meant, he got up, grabbed his bag, and immediately headed out of the aircraft, searching for the airport exit. He went outside and began to look around right away. Since he didn't see anyone who appeared to be an elderly professor, he assumed the professor was simply running late. However, as he turned to return to the airport, he heard a cough to his left and turned around to see the famous professor staring at him. "You must be Naruto, right?" he asked in a kind manner, making Naruto feel at ease around him. "Yep, and you must be the famous Professor Oak," he said, extending his hand for a handshake and receiving one in return. Before saying, "If anyone is famous, it's you, my boy," he heard the professor laugh. This made Naruto blink in bewilderment as they made their way to his car. "What do you mean by that, professor?" he asked, and the professor laughed. "Stop being so formal around me, Naruto, and you are the one who wrote those papers on the Mind Arts Trio, correct?" Oak asked, and he was nodded in agreement as they began to drive to Oak's lab. The professor continued, "Don't be so embarrassed. There's your answer." Oreya showed it to all the regional professors, and we then sent those papers to gym leaders and Elite Four members. He then turned to face Naruto and laughed at his shocked expression. "I'm guessing Oreya didn't tell you that, did she?" he said, smiling, and got a nod in return. "You should be proud, as everyone was impressed with how well they were all written," he continued, receiving a nod from a red-faced Naruto. After that, they drove in silence and made small talk, talking about theories and as such. The professor was surprised to learn that Naruto had a photographic memory but told him that it was for best. He also told Naruto that Oreya had sent over a present for him that she didn't have the time to give to him, making Naruto excited. As they finally made it to the lab, they saw a crowd waiting outside it with 3 kids waiting near the door. As they got closer, Naruto was able to see that it was 2 boys and 1 girl. The first boy, named Richie, as he heard right, wore a green jumper and blue jeans. As far as he could tell, he had brown hair, nothing special, Naruto thought. Next to him stood a girl with black hair and a baseball hat. Leaf, he thought as he heard her name be shouted out. She wore jeans and a white shirt with a blue jacket on. Naruto also dismissed her as an immediate threat. The last boy that stood made him raise his eyebrow. The kid stood with clear confidence and wore a dark blue jumper with dark blue jeans. He had spiky brown hair, and as they walked up to the lab, he heard him say to the professor, "Geez, Gramps, do you want to take any longer?" making Naruto question who he was. The professor introduced them all, so Naruto didn't have to wait long. He saw that Richie and Gary, the professor's grandson, looked at him with a hint of interest, and he nodded in return. The professor, realizing that the introductions were over, led them all to the room where the Pokemon were kept. When he noticed that there were only 3 Pokeballs, Leaf asked a question that the 3 trainers without Pokemon were wondering. "Professor, there's 4 of us here and you only have 3 Pokemon on the table. Why is that?" The professor simply laughed and said, "Good eye, Leaf. You see, Naruto here already has 2 Pokemon and his sister has sent him another Pokemon which he will receive while you get your starters," as he observed the children staring at him in awe. Naruto simply remained composed and raised an eyebrow, wondering what Oreya had brought him. He watched as the 3 children overcame their surprise and proceeded to select their Pokemon, and he watched as Leaf selected a Bulbasaur and walked away with it, giving him one final look. He watched Richie go for Charmander and wondered why someone would call their fire-type Zippo after a lighter. He simply sighed as he watched them choose their Pokemon, and he wished for some companionship. Unaware that everyone in the room was watching, he grabbed a Pokeball from his belt and threw it into the air. "Hey girl," he said softly as Ruby formed, and he was pleased to see her nuzzle his face to show her love for him. He continued quickly, "We're gonna be getting a new teammate soon. I want you to greet them with me, okay?" and was pleased to see her nod, which made him smile and scratch her chin, getting a purr from her. The professor stammered out an answer for him as he looked up. "It's nothing. I'm just surprised to see an Absol. They are extremely rare and not found in Kanto." Naruto and Ruby snorted as they imagined how he would react to seeing Katsumi. "What?" he asked, seeing the professor and the boys staring at him. Before he saw Gary pick up a squirrel, he watched Richie leave. He heard Gary say, "I hope we get to battle soon," and he walked over to him with an outstretched hand. Naruto smiled back and shook his hand, saying, "Of course, it'll be great." He watched as Gary smiled at him again before leaving with the squirrel in its pokeball. He turned to face the professor, who was once again staring at Naruto in disbelief. "That's the first time Gary has ever been so nice to someone," the professor said, prompting Naruto to ask again, "What?" Naruto smiled and responded, "It must be because he respects me and has deemed me worthy of being his rival." The professor nodded back, muttering, "That's the only logical answer." He saw the professor clap his hands before he pulled out a pokeball and said, "Well, this dash." He stopped in the middle of his sentence when a boy in green and yellow pajamas ran in and yelled, "Wait." Both Naruto and the professor were startled and gave the boy a wide-eyed look before he took a few deep breaths and said, he pointed at Ruby and said, "You can't give him that Pokemon, Professor." The professor asked, "And why is that, Ash?" And immediately replied, "It's because he already has a Pokemon, see?" Ruby sent him a warning growl which caused him to jump, and Naruto simply gave him a disinterested look before pushing his hand out towards the professor and watching as he slid the ball into his hand. Holding it firmly, he looked to his right to see the child at this point of crying. "The hell?" he asked aloud as he looked at Ruby and saw that she was giving him the same look of wonder. He also looked at the professor and saw that he was in a panic, so he sighed and looked at him in an attempt to save his face. He calmly asked, "What are you doing here, kid?" and watched as he snapped his head in his direction with a glare before responding, "I came here to get my starter Pokemon and to start my adventure of becoming a Pokemon master," Ash said firmly. Naruto simply raised an eyebrow at him before responding, "Well, last time I checked, Pokemon masters don't go on journeys with their pajamas on," and grinned when he saw Ash gritting his teeth. He glanced at Ruby, who gave him a funny look which made him smile in return. Ash changed the topic and caused Naruto to frown before he said, "This Pokemon is a gift from someone dear to me, so stop your yapping as you are not getting it." He paused to allow Ash to comprehend his statement before adding, "And can't you ask the professor for one? He must have had one ready for you." "Yeah, well, you don't need that Pokemon, so give it here, you already have one," Ash replied. They all looked at the professor expectantly as he said this, and he rubbed the back of his head before saying, "Well, I do have one Pokemon dash," and then being interrupted again when Ash yelled, "I'll take it." The professor scowled and continued, "But I only caught it days ago and it hasn't been cooperative." Naruto scowled as he realized the situation, and he was irritated to see Ash pleading with the professor. As he looked at the pokeball in his hand, he asked Ruby if she was ready. When she nodded, he threw it into the air, and to his great surprise, a human-like metallic body with a dome of metal covering its face. A huge blade that resembled an axe protruding from it, tiny metallic feet, and long arms with a single claw of metal as its hand appeared in front of him. It was red and black, and it opened its eyes under its helmet to examine him before nodding. His eyes snapped open in shock as he saw it cross one arm over its body, drop to one knee, and bow its head. He knew what Pokemon it was, of course, and Ruby recognized it as well. He couldn't understand why a proud, cocky Pokemon like a Ponyard was bowing to him when he had done nothing to earn its respect. He turned back to the professor to see if he knew anything, and he saw him holding a Pokeball. "Juniper told me that the Ponyard was actually bred to be calm and not so proud as the ones in the wild. It makes him the perfect Pokemon for a trainer," the professor said in a hurry after noticing his expression, causing Naruto to blink. Knowing what that meant, he turned to Ruby and asked, "Could you ask if he has a name?" Ruby nodded, realizing why Naruto had asked before she began growling at Ponyard. He heard an instant response that sounded like a metallic hum, and then he turned back to Ruby to see her shake her head no. "Thank you." He sat down and looked at the Ponyard. I am not your master, he said confidently, and it stood up in less than a second. It gave a brief look of surprise, but he continued swiftly to keep its attention. I am no one's master. If you decide to join, you will be joining a family where we all look after and protect each other. Finally, he said, I'll make you stronger, that's a promise, but I'll need you to see us as friends and family, not comrades. Do you think you can do that? Naruto grinned as the Pokemon considered his words, nodded, and saluted him with amusement evident in its eyes. Welcome to the family, Rook, he said, nodding back. The professor then nodded in agreement as the three of them turned to face their audience, and Ash gave them a look of amazement. Okay, my turn, Ash remarked with barely controlled excitement. As he threw the Pokeball he was holding into the air, a yellow-looking mouse with a tail that resembled a lightning bolt and red checks on its face emerged. Naruto's first thought was a Pikachu, followed by cute, as he glanced at his two partners and noticed that they were staring at the yellow Pokemon with narrowed eyes. A moment later, he noticed that they were tense, and he quickly turned back to see Ash embracing the Pikachu and massaging its cheeks, giving it a distressed look. He watched as the Pikachu leaped out of his arms and rubbed its hands together. When Naruto realized that they were all in imminent danger, he was about to yell for them to return when he saw Ruby and Rook teleport towards it with dark energy surrounding their blades. They then swung it at the mouse, causing it to stop charging its attack and fly into a wall so quickly that the wall had dented. Sucker Punch, he thought, recognizing the move, before he rushed towards his Pokemon, absently listening to Ash yell, Pikachu, in concern. As he arrived, he quickly checked them both for injuries, and when he saw none, he sighed in relief and gave them both a proud look. Good job, you two. That was amazing, he said, amused to see Ruby turn away from him to conceal her blush of embarrassment, while Rook simply scratched the top of his head. Are you sure this is a good idea? He's a clueless rookie? He asked, causing the oak to sigh before answering. I have to allow it, Naruto. He passed his test, and I can't keep him here for any longer. Naruto nodded in understanding as he stood up, turned to face Ash, who was holding the Pikachu in his arms, and looked at it worriedly. Don't die out there, I want to have a battle, he said, leaving without waiting for his response before leaving. After a few minutes, he arrived at the entrance to Route 1. Where he saw another crowd standing there with banners bearing Ash's name on them. He simply sighed and shook his head as he walked through it with Ruby and Rook by his sides, drawing confused looks from the people. He took out his last Pokeball and let Katsumi greet him in her customary manner, hugging him before nodding to Ruby, who returned it out of respect. He knew they didn't have the best relationship right now and that they only respected each other's power, but he had hoped that they would soon grow closer. He watched as she examined Rook. It took a few tense seconds for her to nod her approval, which made him sigh with relief. Rook nodded back in respect, realizing that she was strong enough to lead their team and be his boy's closest protector. Although Rook hadn't spent much time with them, he had already sensed the power his young master possessed, and he had vowed to protect Naruto with his life because he knew that only under his tutelage would he acquire the strength he needed to become one of his species' strongest and Naruto's most trusted defenders. In order to get their attention, Naruto whistled. Then he asked, I want to know if you three are ready to start our journey, and received nods from them, which made him smile. Good, as soon as we pass that sign, he said, pointing to the sign in front of them, we officially begin our journey. You ready? He asked again, and they nodded and smiled. So with a final breath, Naruto turned to the route and said, then let's start heading towards greatness. He should have been amused before his partners barked or hummed, in Rook's case, and ran to catch up to him. Everyone was grinning, eager to discover what the Pokemon world had in store for them.